Hello everyone and welcome back to Angie's Table. Today I'm going to be sharing some tips and info that I wish I knew sooner about ingredients that we use in the kitchen every day. I think it's essential to understand our ingredients not only to elevate our cooking, but to understand the correct use for it. Today we'll be covering 4 topics. I've received a lot of questions and comments about all-purpose flour versus Korean frying powder or Korean pancake mix, and we'll also explore the world of different oils and salts, and lastly we'll end it with baking powder versus baking soda. And while we talk about all of this, I'm going to also be making some Korean kimchi pancakes, so let's get started. Do this the Korean way. All-purpose flour is versatile and it's generally milled from different types of wheat flour. As the name suggests, all-purpose flour is suitable for all types of baked goods such as bread, biscuits, pizza, cookies, muffin, and etc. So Korean frying powder already has seasoning and ingredients to make the batter crispy like rice flour. When I make these Korean pancakes, technically you're supposed to be using Korean pancake mix, but I personally like it really crispy, so that's why I use the Korean frying mix. People ask me, can you substitute it? The answer is no, and I knew the answer was no because it tastes different, but I didn't understand the reasoning behind it, the why. I did my fair share of research. In order to understand flour, we need to understand what gluten is. So gluten is actually a protein in wheat flour. That's what makes bread look like it's pulling apart, and it has like that elastic look to it, almost like bouncy and kind of chewy in a sense. So remember when I said earlier that rice flour is a component in this Korean frying powder? That is the key because rice flour does not contain gluten. So it makes things more crispy as opposed to having like this elastic network in it, which is something that you really don't want in anything that you want extra crispy like Korean fried chicken, or for me in this case, Korean pancakes. If you guys don't have Korean frying powder available the next time you are using one of our recipes, then I would suggest adding some cornstarch or potato starch into your all-purpose flour so you make the batter a little bit more crispy, because cornstarch and potato starch will do the trick. I'll add a little bit of salt. So now we're going to go into talking about the salts, and I will be discussing 3 types of salt. We'll have sea salt and kosher and regular table salt, because I do think that these are probably the more common ones. So we'll start off with sea salt. Sea salt, well, it's obviously from the sea, as the name suggests. It's what's left over when the water evaporates from the ocean or from saltwater lakes. Sea salt is usually minimally processed, so it retains a lot of nutrients like magnesium, calcium, iron, and etc. Sea salt has a coarser grain than table salt, but not as coarse of a grain when you compare it to kosher. Now, speaking of kosher, kosher has a bigger grain consistency. It's usually not iodized and it's very versatile. Like people use it for baking or even in regular cooking. So since it's coarse, it's a larger grain and it technically doesn't dissolve right away. Just because it's kosher salt doesn't mean that it is actually kosher. Kosher is how the Jewish people prepare their foods in their religious way. So you'll see a lot of like kosher deli where it pertains to how they are religiously supposed to be preparing their foods. It doesn't mean all kosher salt is actually kosher though. So table salt, this is probably what you guys are most used to seeing when you go to restaurants and you have like the salt and pepper. That is table salt, and this is the most financially ideal. It is the cheapest, and sometimes it's iodized, sometimes it's not iodized, but normally I feel like it is iodized. When it says it's iodized, I don't think it necessarily is healthy. It kind of has like a metallic-y taste to it, so it's not ideal, but I feel like when you're cooking it and other ingredients are masking it, it's okay. Generally though, I think most people would prefer to stick to kosher or sea salt because it's healthier. Add a lot of olive oil. So now we're going to go on to talking about our oils, and I group vegetable oil, corn oil, and canola oil all into the same category. So all 3 of these are probably the least expensive of the oils, and it has a very high smoking point, which is why it's used for deep frying, and you can most commonly see it at restaurants. It almost has no flavor, so it's really good to use. It doesn't really take away from the dish. It's not the best for your health, but when you're stir frying and just like regular cooking or deep frying, it's the best. And next we'll talk about extra virgin olive oil, also known as EVOO. And this is mostly used as finishing touches on top of like pizzas and pastas or salads, or even in salad dressings. And it doesn't have a high smoking point, but it is very expensive. So extra virgin olive oil is actually cold pressed. If you really look at the label of an EVOO bottle, it'll say that it's cold pressed, and that's what makes it very expensive, because it's a method where it maintains more of the flavor profiles, making it more complex. It also doesn't have a high smoking point, which is why it's only used just as finishing touches or just for processes that don't require much cooking. Next is probably the most common, I think, is olive oil. And olive oil is something that I use personally in my kitchen. The smoking point is on the higher side, not exactly quite up there with the vegetable canola and corn, but it's perfect when you want to make herb-infused oils like rosemary or garlic. It's really good for that. It's, I think, just best for regular cooking. Next we have coconut oil, and I feel like this was a huge fad like a little while back, and I am guilty of actually falling into one of these fads. I would spoon feed Juno like spoonfuls of coconut oil in college and be like, you have to eat this because it's so good for you. Coconut oil turns solid at room temp, and it has a very strong coconut scent to it. When you are heating that up, oh my god, it smells like, for me, I think it smells like hair burning. I think most people use this for baking or anything that requires lower heat cooking, just like sauteing or something that doesn't require such a high smoking point.
I use it for like cast iron skillet.
That's to clean it?
When you grease it, after you use it, you can use something that has high saturated oils, and that's typically what I use.
Okay. I don't really know about the cooking with it, but I think it's really great for moisturizing your hair and your skin. And next we'll talk about sesame oil. And sesame oil is something that I always have, and I always use this one brand. It's a Japanese brand, and I feel like all Asian Korean moms have this brand in their kitchen. And sesame oil has a very earthy, aromatic, and nutty flavor to it. Most people will add it into their salad dressings or just in a lot of Asian cookings. I personally like to add it in at the end of the cooking process, just so that the smell isn't burnt away from the heat, but it stays put on top of your dish. And lastly, we have avocado oil, and I feel like this is probably really popular these days. Like, I feel like a lot of people use it because they say it's healthy, and it is true because it has a high amount of monounsaturated fats, which is a good thing. It actually has one of the highest smoking points compared to a lot of the oils. So I think it's good overall to have in your kitchen, but it is just so expensive. I think it's the most expensive of all the oils. I don't know if it's just because it's like a thing right now or not, but it is the most expensive. So this is why I just stick to olive oil. So now we will eat.
My favorite part is this person.
The edge.
Yeah.
Here, I'll go like this. Bring it down. Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My head is tender.
Oh, so that's what it tastes.
So I keep on to focus on you.
Is it good?
So good. And you know what? It's a little gloomy outside.
I know.
I think it's gonna rain. It's like perfect.
It's so gloomy. Koreans eat pancakes, Korean pancakes on gloomy days, because they say, I think I said this before on our kimchi pancake video, but because the frying of the pancakes on the oil sounds like raindrops.
Really good.
So the last topic we have, baking soda versus baking powder. I feel like all of us have our occurrence with some story with it. Baking is not my forte. Like, I do not know how to follow directions. I kind of just want to do whatever I want, but with baking you have to be very precise. So there's one time where I was like, I don't need baking powder, I just need baking soda. So obviously that is not the case. They're very different. Primary difference between powder and soda is that baking powder already contains an acid in the chemical mixture. You're not supposed to use baking powder with things that already have acidic things. So with biscuits, cornbread, pancakes, all of those things, you use baking powder. Whereas baking soda, it needs an acidic ingredient to create the rising reaction. So buttermilk, vinegar, lemon, all of those things are acidic ingredients that can help with this process. I hope that kind of helps you guys understand the difference between them. They're very, 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 very different, which means you can't substitute it. I think I stressed that enough. I've learned my fair share of mistakes with it because I don't follow directions. I would love to do more content regarding these types of things. Let us know and we'll see you guys in our next video.